Our relationship with colleagues often start as a casual interactions, but they can evolve into vital alliances that contribute to personal and collective success. This takes to on a journey through the stages of relationship development, equipping them with effective communication strategies and practical techniques to foster trust, enhance teamwork, and harness the power of routine of their professional networks. The aim is to empower individuals to transform routine workplace interaction into valuable partnerships, resulting in more fulfilling careers and more successful organization. A very warm welcome to the show, and this is season 9 of EI Cafe with Azim. I'm your host, Azim Said, a human capital specialist, a Lego series play facilitator, an emotionally intelligent practitioner, and a cultural practitioner. I'm one of the lead facilitators at Luminary Learning Solution. You heard a little bit of an introduction. It's more in terms of relationships. So have this conversation. I have an expert in terms of relationship, workplace relationship. Let me introduce him. For over 20 years, he have helped clients to build, nurture, and leverage a professional relationship working across sectors. My relationship metric is trademarks program or the framework gives the client a deep insight into their network and what they need to do better develop them. We then work together on the exceptional relationship buildings look like. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Andy Lopata. Andy, officially welcome to the cafe.
Thank you, Azim. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. So, Andy, as I mentioned, in our initial discussion, relationship is a vital component in organization context. And with my recent experience running a couple of sessions in terms of network and growth, etc., one thing I realize is that people don't know each other like those days how we will know, especially when the whole working from home culture starts. Now, one of the reasons they were said, no, we are working from home, so we don't meet people. So that led me to have this conversation with you, and you are an expert on a workplace relationship. So how do professional relationships evolve from being mere colleague, become a strategic partner, strategic ally in the workplace? What's your thought?
Well, I think that whether you're working from home, whether you're working in the office, success in any role and success in a career depends on having people around you who can support you, who can lift you up on their shoulders. So just a couple of simple examples. If you're dealing with a challenging project and you need other teams to help you, other support, you need insights from people who know what's going on, the information that you don't have, or you need to get in front of someone who doesn't know you. It's other people that can make those things happen. If you want to get a promotion in your job, there was some research in the late part of the last century, and it's still relevant today, which looked at the different factors that went into people winning a promotion. And the performance element, how good you are at your job, how well you do it, 10%. 30% was your image, how people understood, what people understood about what you do. 60% was exposure, who knew. And you need advocates, you need sponsors, you need people who are talking on your behalf and talking about your work, so that that image and that exposure are managed throughout the organization and you're in a position to get that promotion. So whatever we do, we rely on other people to help lift us up. And so irrespective of what you see happening in the moment, in the short term, when you just want to focus on your emails, or you just want to focus on the writing you're doing or the work that you're doing, at some point you're going to need to turn around to someone and either ask for their help, or even in many cases unknown to you, there's a conversation going on and you're relying on them to say the right things about you. And for them to want to help you and for them to say the right things, the relationship underpins it. You need to be building them all the time.
So You just make me recall my one of my memories, one of my early careers. One of my managers said, Azim, if you want to grow in the organization, you make sure you have been shown up in everybody's office. Your name should pop up and people should remember you for what you do. So
Mm,
it just resonate like what you were saying. So one of the challenges is like people do a lot of stuff, a lot of initiatives, a lot of engagement stuff. So Andy, the question is, when I asked them like, who does know about these initiatives? They said, myself and my line manager. I said, so how do we take this about? What would be your point of view, like to go this building this relationship? Building an ally is a second phase, but that if relationships are not there, just being a colleague, say hi, bye, have chit chat, that's it. But what is your take? How do you think we can really transform this particular process?
well, a couple of things there. So going back to, the conversation that you were thinking of, there's a very well-known phrase that people think underpins and captures what networking is all about. And it's not what you know, it's who you know. And globally, we've all heard that phrase, and it's repeated so often in so many environments, and it's incomplete. It is true. It's not what you know, it's who you know. But actually, it's who knows you and what they know, what they say about you when you're not in the room. So you talked about your name coming up in conversations. So many decisions are made when we're not in the room. So much of our reputation is built when we're not in the room. So it doesn't matter that you have those people's names in your phone. It doesn't matter that you've exchanged emails with them once or twice or exchanged business cards with them. It matters that at the right time, they think of you. They know what you stand for and they know what to say about you. So it's not what you know or who you know, it's who knows you and what they know or say about you when you're not in the room. So that was the first thing. The second thing is in your introduction, you mentioned my relationship matrix model. So I talk about professional relationship strategy. Now, if you go back, I've been in this space, as you mentioned, it's actually 25 years next year. And when I started out, everyone taught networking skills, how to work a room, as Suzanne Rowan put it in her book. And I instantly had a problem with that. Not that people should have the skill set to be able to network, but they should have the knowledge about why they're doing so. And it didn't take me long to start talking more about networking strategy than networking skills. And then that evolved into professional relationship strategy. Let's look at it from a wider perspective, because people hear the word networking and they think immediately of events, even though it's more than that. So it evolved into professional relationship strategy, but that key word is strategy, being thoughtful about this. You asked me, how do you change this scenario? How do you go about changing it so that you build the relationships? It starts with a purpose. If you don't have a purpose to build those relationships and you're busy, particularly when you're busy, because we don't go to work to socialize. So it doesn't give us a driver to develop the relationships we need, and we don't think about them until we need them. So the relationship matrix approach that I teach is about starting with a purpose, starting with an objective, and then saying, okay, how can other people help me to that objective? Who are those people, and what do I need to ask them for, or what do I need to look to them for? So if you start with your purpose and then you build in how other people can help you towards that purpose, and you understand the role they have to play, then it starts to make sense to you to invest some time in building relationships with them. You still need to be authentic in the way you build those relationships. You can't use people. You don't want people to feel networked by you. That's why networking has a bad name, because people are manipulative sometimes. Well, I need you. I will use you for this and then I'll drop you. And that leaves us feeling abused effectively, and that's why people shy away from this. So it's very important to balance what I'm saying about that purpose and understanding how people sit within that purpose. We're saying you need to be authentic in the way that you build those relationships, but understand you are building a network of relationships with people so that when you need help, it's there. When they need help, you're there for them as well.
I think, Andy, I just want to add a one per part or a one word into that particular authentic being, no, being your real self, and that's where the credibility builds in relationship, isn't it?
Yes, I would say maybe this isn't for me to say. So this is if I can step aside and try and be objective and observant of my own personality, I guess, and my where I have succeeded
Mm,
in my life and my
mm,
career. I think that it's come because people feel that I'm authentic. That doesn't always work in my way. Sometimes I say things. Sometimes I say things that maybe um, I should think twice, but I just tend to be open and honest with people. I think on the whole that has worked in my favor because people know what they're getting with me. I can't play games; it's not in my DNA.
yeah,
And
I
there
get
are
it.
other people who are on the other side. They're known for playing politics, and
Mm,
people will shy away from them because they
mm.
feel they might be using me.
I got it. Um, so let's get into this particular concept. What are the key, milestones or like steps an individual who's just getting into a corporate environment, an office, an organization, making those connections, and how do you think they can make this transition into a casual coworker who can be trusted ally? What would we think?
Okay, well, there's a few key things that you can do. Number one is be patient. Just if you need something from people, try and hold back if you can until you've built the relationship so people really want to help and support you. It's when you reach out and you don't need anything that you really make an impact. Make friends when you can, not when you need them. So show an interest in other people. 80% of your outreach should be about them, not about you. Follow up with people if you're in a meeting, whether it's in a room together, whether it's on Zoom. Let's say you're in a meeting with 8 or 10 people there and someone says something interesting. If it's on Zoom or Teams, put a note in the chat, private note to them. That was really interesting. uh, I'm glad you said that. So acknowledge them and then follow up afterwards. I was really interested in what you said there. Can we grab a coffee? Particularly if you're new. Robert Cialdini in his work on influence talked about giving people a reason to do why you're doing something, and then people will be happy with your request. So if you're new in an office, say, look, I am new here and I want to get to know people. I want to get to know how things are. Can we grab a coffee? If you've already acknowledged something they've said, if you've said how it's resonated with you, they're more likely to be able to do that. Association is key. If people don't know you, but they see who you associate with, they're going to have more trust in you. When you reached out to me originally, we didn't know each other, but when you said that you know who you work with, that had credibility and trust for me, then that accelerated the trust between us. So I think you can use that association as well, as long again going back, it's done authentically. You're not just throwing in names of people who don't really know you. So it is genuine and it is authentic. So I'm going to go back to one thing I've said already, but I think I can't emphasize it enough, and that is follow up. So another element of follow up is to do what you say you're going to do,
Mm,
under promise and over deliver,
yeah.
and know when it's important to people for you to over deliver. Don't
Mm,
over deliver as a matter of course. Over deliver when it's going to have the maximum impact on people, when you know it's important to them. So there are a lot of little different things there. I think the other thing I can add, there's so many different ideas I could share here.
I know.
But just one more in terms of keeping the conversation flowing is you build relationships over a period of time. So your interactions with people should be consistent and frequent, not just one big interaction and then silence. So look for what I call the opportunity to create touch points, just little touch points, and it can be as small as liking a social media post or adding a comment to it or sharing that social media post. It can be that little note of acknowledgement in a Teams or Zoom chat saying that resonated with me. It could be a thank you. It could be an introduction to someone else, but constantly be looking for those opportunities for touch points. But, and again, reiterating something I've said already, 80% of them make them about them, not about you. over the years, the amount of people that have connected with me on LinkedIn, I haven't heard from them. And then suddenly they've reached out to me and said, we haven't spoken for a year. So I thought I'll tell you what I've been doing. Well, I didn't ask.
Okay.
Ask what I've been doing. Just make it about the other person. Don't make it about yourself.
All right. So two things I really understood. Like now you said, reach out as an associate, like just say comment it, say thank you, and thank you for sharing. Now, Andy, does the personalities does it comes to picture? Because when I'm asking, that are like I've seen in a workshop, some people are very interactive, very engaged, and they make some noise, and some people are very quiet, but it doesn't mean that they are not learning or that not grabbing, but that's the style. Now, in that particular component, connecting with people, how does this personality can make a difference? And how do we need to understand on that, like other side of the person?
I don't think you have to be a behavioral expert to pick up certain cues. So, for example, there's one person in mind in my network who is very good at staying in touch. But I can be, I can be really busy, particularly if I'm writing a book or something like that, and I've got a lot of delivery on, and he will follow up every email with another question and another question and another question. That's his personality style. Now he should pick up my answers get shorter and shorter because I don't have the time to get into long drawn out email conversations that and what he's done, he has stayed in my network where he wouldn't necessarily have been there if he hadn't done that follow up. And I appreciate what he's done. But what he doesn't do is pick up the cues that actually, with Andy, what you need to do is touch base, keep it simple, keep it short. The longer the email, the less likely I am to read it, and give me just the chance to give a simple, quick answer so I can carry on with what I'm doing. And so he's missing those cues. So I think that you can pick up different cues from different people without being a behavioral expert by the way that they engage with you. If someone is quiet, as you rightly said, it doesn't mean they're not engaged. It means their learning style is different. They might be introvert or they might be reflective in their learning style. And that's the way they take things on board. As a speaker, that's been very obvious to me. The amount of times where I've been on the stage and you look for the person. I draw energy from my audience. I'm looking for the people who are smiling and beaming and their eyes are sparkling. And then you always see someone who looks like they're asleep, or they look really angry.
Mm.
And more on numerous occasions, that angry, sleepy person has been the one to come up to me afterwards and say, that was fantastic. Their face sits that way when they're concentrating. So we have to avoid our preconceptions, our instant judgment. And we have to understand that people react differently to conversation, to engagement, to whatever it might be. And let them guide you in the way they like to engage with you.
Wow. That's a lot of information out there, right? So as you were really talking about engaging and picking up the cues and the stops and etc. Now, my next question is, how does the piece of communication and having that shared goal to contribute to the transformation of this professional relationship into an ally, how does that work? How this two component can come into picture?
So you're asking me how you move someone along from someone you've just met into an ally,
Absolutely.
an advocate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a
And
model called the seven stage.
in that journey, Andy, how like communication and effective communication piece can come into picture.
Well, I think a lot of what we've already discussed probably comes into that last question. Understanding their personality style, consistent and frequent communication, focusing on them. Over time, you would nurture the relationship. And that's the key. It's thinking about it as nurturing. You're a farmer, you've planted the seed, you want the flower to bloom, and that takes time. I have a model of the seven stages of professional relationship where we start out where we don't know each other. We go to the point where we recognize, then we know, like, and trust, to use Bob Berg's famous phrase. And I would throw into that respect. We don't always like people proactively, positively like. We may not dislike them. That can be a problem. But you could be neutral. You can not have rapport, but you can respect them. And then you get to what I call the sweet spot, which is levels five and six out of the seven, and that is supporter and advocate. A supporter is someone who, if you phoned and asked for their help, they would give it to you. An advocate is someone you don't even have to phone. They see an opportunity, they're talking about you. And then level seven is friend. Now, if you look at any relationship you have and you put them on that seven stages of professional relationship journey based on where you feel they are at the moment, then you think about that individual and your previous interactions with them. There's a simple question: what do I need to do to get them to the next stage? So the flaw in your question, if I may, and it's not really a flaw, but it's a way of illustrating it, is to think that you can go from meeting someone to be their advocate, them being your advocate. That can happen. It's happened to me, particularly if that first engagement involves you demonstrating what you do well. Then you're going to fire through really quickly to advocacy if their personality type is the type that is an active advocate, because some people will recommend and refer and evangelize as soon as they're enthused by someone or something. Others will take their time, they're more cautious. So you've got that plays into it as well. But instead of jumping from don't know to advocate, aim to jump from don't know to know. How do I get this person to know me, to when they walk past me? So level one is recognize rather than know. How do I get them to recognize me when they're in a meeting? How do I get them from recognize to knowing me? So for me, knowing me is understand who I am and what I'm about, what I stand for, what my role is, where I fit in this organizational chart. How do I get them from knowing me to liking or respecting me? So where's the rapport? What have we got in common? Let's start to build some conversations. Let's move away from the transactional to the relational conversations where we can. How do I get them to trust me? Is that based on delivery? Is that based on showing expertise, showing knowledge? Is that based on giving to them? How do I get them from trusting me to supporting me? Do they understand, what I'm looking for? Have I asked for a small thing to see if they'd be willing to help me with that? Again, back to Cialdini, you start with something small. How do I get them from supporting to advocating? So it's the old adage of how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time.
Absolutely. And I'm really curious. You said something like from trusting to supporting. Now, I was in the impression the other way around. People keep supporting and they build the trust. And then like I'm supporting Andy and he will support me, then we build the trust. I'm just a bit confused over there. It's just like
well, isn't it? It's neither one nor the other. It's a cycle. The more you support me, the more I trust you. The more I trust you, the more I support you, and it's cyclical. But in the journey that I've, the seven stages of professional relationships was designed to get people thinking about their networks in a different way, rather than thinking about them as a binary pot of people. How many people have you got in your network? But to think about where people are on that journey with them. So if that means that respect or like comes before trust, or it's the other way around, that you can argue that as well. But I do think that people are more likely to support people they trust. And again, as I said with like, I think there's a difference between I don't trust you and I distrust you. Now, normally we use the language in the same. So if I say I don't trust you, you think I distrust you. It might mean I don't know you well enough to trust you yet. So I'm neutral in trust. If someone is distrusting you, they're not going to support you anyway. If they're neutral, it's going to limit the amount of support they will give you. If they trust you highly, they'll fall over themselves to support you. So I would argue, generally speaking, that trust comes before support, because the more trust there is, the more impactful the support they'll offer. But support reinforces that trust as well.
Brilliant. Thank you for that clarification. It does make sense now. Okay. Now, before we go to because we're almost in our conversation, right? So before I'm really curious, like, how do we do this repairing part in a relationship? In a workplace, you find misunderstanding, you will have conflict, you have a lot of things. Let's say we go through from, being just a friend to just to be an advocate. In between, you can have this lot of things coming in. How do we repair it?
I had a lot of conversations about this recently. First thing I should say on this is that it takes two people. And sometimes you can have all the best intentions, and you should have the best intention to repair the conflict if you can. And there is an exception to that, which I'll come to. I think it's an important one. But if the other person has no intention of repairing the conflict, you have to just put your hands up and say, well, I will do the best I can. And this has happened to me a couple of times recently, both personally and professionally, where there's been conflict. I've tried to address it in an adult, non-blame lying manner, in one where I feel very, very strongly that I've been very, very badly treated by the other person. I've still apologized because I've apologized for what my role was. That has neither been accepted nor anything has come back, but I have no power over that. You know,
Mm,
I can only control what I can control. And in another, I try to address it in, again, addressing all of their concerns, explaining them all, but they were just stuck in the rut of, blinkers on, not wanting to hear, but just having a narrative and wanting to stick to it, even though it was unfortunately a misguided, misunderstood narrative. Um, I can't do anything about those two people. They have decided that that's what they'll see. So I think that you will have occasions where that conflict can't be resolved because it takes two people to resolve a conflict. All you can do is step forward and do the best you can and be the best you can be in that space. And I don't want to paint myself as an angel. I probably haven't done that in every conflict. Um, but certainly in those two, I was very conscious of trying
mm,
to step away from
mm,
emotion, trying to
mm,
resolve it
mm,
at least to a point, where I could, and then the other person wasn't interested, and therefore, and that takes me to the exception, because there are also times when there's been a conflict, and for me, I've seen a side of that other person where my trust in them is diminished to a level where I wouldn't want to have anything to do with them. So if you have to work with them, you have to find a neutral ground where you may not like each other, you may dislike each other, you may distrust each other, but you have to find a space where you can work together. Um, and that leads me to my overall answer, which is communication. And that communication, ideally, and this was our whole point of our conversation last night, which was about someone else's conflict, is in person. Because, and this was a professional conflict, but involved people that person had been friends with for a long time. Everything was, and I sent them this email, and they sent me that email, and I sent them this email, and I sent that email. And when you do everything over email or WhatsApp or social media, it it lacks any nuance. It lacks conversation. You want to get together in a room, and then the attitude is not who's to blame, but how do we move forward from here? And if moving forward means that each of you talk about how you feel, and I think I had a podcast conversation recently, or wrote an article for Psychology Today, or both. I just know this conversation took place recently, and I shared it. Um, if you need to talk about the challenges you faced, then talk about it in terms of this was the impact of what you did rather than this is what you did. So not laying the blame for what happened, but explaining how it made you feel, explaining how what it led to, and then saying, how can we repair this? And then you remove blame from the conversation. You're talking about
mm.
consequence rather than the
Yeah.
action. And that to me is the way to go through. And it needs both
Mm,
parties to buy into that
mm,
narrative and that approach and that mindset.
mm.
Um, but you tee that up from the
Yeah.
beginning.
Absolutely. I think 100%, because it's just a matter of two individual getting to a place and get that space, have that conversation matters a lot. And
Yeah.
quickly, I know we're just running out of time. I'm very curious with your experience. Did you have anything related to generational issue in terms of work relationship? Because there are a lot of issues coming up.
That's a whole podcast.
Yeah, that's another
Um,
podcast. I know. Just want a quick one from you, and
yeah.
we.
Well, you're in a place now where there's 5 or 6 different generations working together in the same workplace with different upbringings. You've got baby boomers for whom computers weren't even invented. I'm Gen X, where a computer was something to play games on. And I remember when we first had a
Yeah.
computer room, we had a computer room at school, and an IT class. But that was it. And then you've got millennials and Gen Zs or Gen Zs, depending on how you pronounce it, where they're born with an iPad or a tablet in their hand. I saw a wonderful video a few years ago of a toddler with a magazine and trying to press the images to move on.
Ooh.
So that's just one example of the different attitudes. You've got the boomers and the Gen X's who came from hierarchical
Mm.
management structures and a job for life. You've got millennials and Gen Zs who
Mm.
want to be mentored and not managed, and
Mm.
are looking at portfolio careers. So all of those attitudes, all those mindsets are different, and it comes again to what we've just been talking about in terms of
Mm.
conflict. It comes from seeking to understand rather than seeking to tell, and that
Yeah.
goes both ways. Whether you are a Gen Z frustrated with baby boomers, or you're a baby boomer frustrated with Gen Zs, stop getting frustrated. Understand they come from a different generation, a different
Mm.
background, a different
Mm.
mindset, and
Yeah.
learn about it and understand. When both parties try to do that, you have a conversation.
What a way to end our conversation for today. Andy, what would be a one key takeaway you want to share with our audience and viewers?
I think if there was one thing, it's think about all of this in the long term. Build your relationships to serve you for your whole career,
Mm.
not for today.
Mm.
When you rush in, you make mistakes, you burn relationships. Stephen Covey talked about it like a bank account, emotional bank accounts. He talked about,
Mm.
think about it as a bank account or a pension scheme. Invest today so that when you need something, it's there for you to withdraw.
So invest in your relationship is a key message from Andy. And I'm going to take my key takeaway as the support and the trust. It's an intertwined process. And I hope, and my belief is our listeners and viewers got plenty of key takeaways from today's podcast. So my special thanks and gratitude to Andy Lopata for spending his valuable time in the cafe. You can get connected to his social media platform. He has his own podcast. All the links will be available on the podcast note for you to refer and get connected. With that, Andy, thank you very much for bringing this whole element of relationship at work to the context.
Thank you, Azim. It's been a pleasure to join you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this podcast of EI Cafe with Azim. We sure do hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, please do reach out. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the show that is available on all major podcast platforms so you're notified when a new episode is posted. Please rate, review, and leave a comment and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you're leaving with some great insights that can help you in your daily life. Follow Azim on social media and do write to us on topics and experts you'd like to hear from, and we will try to get them on board. Goodbye for now, until we meet again on another episode of EI Cafe with Azim.